My fiancé said. If you really loved me, you'd trust me completely, while refusing to explain why she was out till 4 a.m. I said, if you really loved me, you'd give me a reason to, and called off the wedding. She spent hours to clarify what she actually meant. I, 29M, thought I knew everything about trust until my fiancé decided to redefine it for me 3 weeks before our wedding. It started on a Tuesday night when she didn't come home. We'd been living together for 8 months, planning our wedding, talking about kids, the whole fairy tale. She'd mentioned going out with her sister after work, nothing unusual. But when 1 a.m. turned into 2 a.m., then 3 a.m., and my calls went straight to voicemail, something cold settled in my stomach. She finally walked through our front door at 4:17 a.m. I was sitting on the couch, still in my work clothes from the day before, watching the numbers on my phone change. She looked surprised to see me awake, which somehow made everything worse. I asked her where she'd been. Simple question. She said she'd been out with her sister, that they'd lost track of time. Her clothes were wrinkled, her makeup smudged, and there was something in her eyes I'd never seen before, a kind of frantic calculation, like she was solving a math problem in real time. I told her I'd called her sister around midnight, worried something had happened. Her sister had been home since 10 p.m., confused about why I was looking for my fiancé. The lie hung between us like a physical thing, ugly and undeniable. That's when she said it. If I really loved her, I'd trust her completely. No explanations needed, no questions asked. Love meant blind faith, according to her. She was tired, she said, and didn't want to deal with my insecurity right now. I stared at her for a long moment. This woman I'd planned to marry, and something fundamental shifted inside me. I told her that if she really loved me, she'd give me a reason to trust her. Then I said the wedding was off. The transformation was instant. The calculated look vanished, replaced by pure panic. She suddenly had plenty of energy to talk, begging me to sit down, to listen, to understand. But I was done listening to lies. I spent that night at my brother's place, ignoring the 17 missed calls and 43 text messages that lit up my phone. The next morning, I started making the calls: venue, caterer, photographer. Each conversation felt like pulling off a bandage, painful but necessary. She showed up at my office that afternoon. My secretary buzzed me, saying my fiancé was in the lobby, crying, insisting she needed to explain everything. I told her to have security escort her out. Professional embarrassment was the least of my concerns now. That evening, she was waiting by my car in the parking garage. She looked like she hadn't slept, still wearing the same clothes from the night before. She said she was ready to tell me everything, that she'd been protecting me from something I wouldn't understand. I asked her if she'd cheated. The pause before her answer told me everything I needed to know, even though she said no. It wasn't technically cheating, she explained, because nothing physical happened. She'd been meeting with her ex-boyfriend, the one who'd broken her heart 2 years before I met her. He'd been texting her for months, saying he'd made a mistake, wanting to see if there was still something between them. She insisted she'd been planning to cut contact with him after the wedding, that she just needed to be sure she wasn't making a mistake with me. She needed to know if her feelings for him were really dead before she committed to me forever. I listened to her entire explanation without saying a word. When she finished, I told her she'd answered my question perfectly. She had been meeting another man behind my back for months, lying about it, and questioning our entire relationship. The only mistake she'd mentioned was potentially marrying me. Her face crumpled as the reality of what she'd said hit her. She tried to backtrack, saying she'd explained it wrong, that she loved me, that she'd chosen me. But the damage was done. She'd shown me exactly how she defined love and trust, and it was nothing like my definition. Over the next week, she launched what I can only describe as a campaign to win me back. Flowers at my office, letters slipped under my apartment door, calls to my friends and family explaining how it was all a misunderstanding. She painted herself as a victim of her own uncertainty, someone who'd made an innocent mistake while trying to be honest about her feelings. But I'd started putting pieces together. The late nights she'd blamed on work projects. The way she'd started keeping her phone face down. The sudden interest in girls' nights that she'd never mentioned enjoying before. The lie about her sister wasn't her first lie. It was just the first one I'd caught. Update 1. A week after I called off the wedding, my ex-fiancé's best friend reached out to me. She said she couldn't stay quiet anymore and asked to meet for coffee. What she told me changed everything I thought I knew about the situation. According to her friend, the meetings with the ex-boyfriend had been going on for 4 months, not just recently. They'd been meeting for dinner, drinks, long walks in the park where they used to go when they dated. My ex-fiancée had been telling her friend that she was confused, that seeing him again had brought back feelings she thought were gone. But here's the part that really got to me. She'd been actively comparing us. She'd made lists, actual written lists, weighing the pros and cons of staying with me versus going back to him. Her friend had seen one of these lists. Under his name, passionate, exciting, makes me feel alive. Under mine, stable, reliable, good provider. I felt sick. For months, while I'd been planning our future, picking out wedding rings, talking about where we'd go on our honeymoon, she'd been conducting some twisted relationship experiment with me as the safe backup option. Her friend also mentioned something else. The night she came home at 4 a.m. wasn't the first time she'd stayed out late with him. There had been at least 3 other occasions where she'd told different lies, working late, helping a friend, stuck in traffic. Each time, she'd been with him. I realized I needed to know the full truth. I hired a private investigator, something I never thought I'd do in my life. It felt dramatic and paranoid, but I needed to know what else I'd missed. The investigator's report arrived 2 weeks later. The meetings had started 5 months ago, right after her ex had moved back to town. They'd been to restaurants, hotels, bars, and yes, they'd spent time at his apartment. The investigator had photos of them holding hands, kissing in his car, her leaving his building early in the morning on 2 separate occasions. The woman I'd planned to marry had been living a double life for months. While I'd been worried about wedding details and our future together, she'd been actively cheating on me and trying to decide if she wanted to be with someone else. Update 2. Armed with the investigator's report, I finally agreed to meet with my ex-fiancée. She'd been calling and texting constantly, getting increasingly desperate as the days passed, and I maintained no contact. She suggested we meet at the cafe where we'd had our first date, which felt like either extreme manipulation or complete lack of awareness. I chose a neutral location instead, a busy restaurant where she couldn't make a scene. When I arrived, she was already there, looking like she'd lost weight and definitely hadn't been sleeping. She immediately launched into another explanation about how everything had been innocent, how she'd never physically cheated, how she'd been planning to tell me everything after the wedding. I let her talk for about 10 minutes before I placed the investigator's folder on the table between us. I told her I knew about all of it. Every meeting, every lie, every night she'd spent at his apartment. I knew about the lists comparing us, about the months of deception, about everything. Watching her face change was like watching someone age and fast forward. The color drained from her cheeks, and for the first time since this whole thing started, she had nothing to say. She stared at the folder like it might disappear if she looked at it hard enough. When she finally spoke, she asked me why I'd hired someone to follow her. She seemed genuinely shocked that I'd gone to such lengths, as if the problem was my investigation rather than her behavior. She said it showed I'd never really trusted her, that maybe we weren't right for each other after all, if I was capable of something so paranoid. I almost laughed. Here she was, caught in months of lies and cheating, trying to make me the villain for uncovering the truth. I told her she was right about one thing. We definitely weren't right for each other. Then she shifted tactics again. She admitted to everything but claimed it had all been a mistake, a moment of weakness that had spiraled out of control. She said she'd been scared of commitment, terrified of making the wrong choice, and had handled it in the worst possible way. She begged me to understand that people make mistakes, that love means forgiveness, that we could work through this together. I asked her a simple question. If the investigator hadn't found evidence, if I'd never discovered the truth, what would have happened? Would she have gone through with the wedding while still seeing him? Would she have told me on our honeymoon? Or would she have just continued the affair indefinitely? She couldn't answer. Or wouldn't. Either way, her silence told me everything I needed to know. Update 3. What happened next surprised everyone, including me. Instead of walking away quietly, I decided my ex-fiancée needed to face some consequences for her actions. Not just the end of our relationship, but real accountability for the web of lies she'd constructed. I started with her family. I'd been close to her parents, had spent holidays with them, had asked her father for his blessing before proposing. They deserved to know why their daughter's wedding had been canceled, especially since they'd already spent thousands of dollars on preparations. I met with her parents and sister, bringing copies of the investigator's report. Her mother cried. Her father, a man I'd respected enormously, looked disgusted. Her sister seemed shocked, but admitted she'd suspected something was wrong in recent months. They thanked me for telling them the truth and apologized for their daughter's behavior. Next, I contacted everyone who'd been invited to our wedding. Instead of just saying it was canceled, I sent a detailed explanation of why. I attached some of the evidence, photos of her with her ex, timeline of the lies, screenshots of her text messages that the investigator had legally obtained. I wanted everyone to understand that this wasn't a mutual decision or cold feet. This was about deception and betrayal. The response was overwhelming. Friends who'd known us as a couple reached out to express their shock and support. Several people mentioned they'd had strange feelings about her behavior lately, but hadn't wanted to interfere. Her own friends started distancing themselves from her as the truth spread through our social circle. I also made sure her workplace knew. She'd used work as an excuse for many of her late nights with her ex, claiming urgent projects and demanding deadlines that didn't exist. Her supervisor needed to know she'd been lying about her whereabouts and potentially misusing company time. It was a professional integrity issue. But the most satisfying part was dealing with her ex-boyfriend. Through the investigator, I'd learned he had no idea she was engaged when they started meeting. She'd told him we'd broken up months ago, that she was single and trying to figure out what she wanted. He'd been just as deceived as I had been. I reached out to him directly, sharing everything I'd discovered. He was horrified. He genuinely believed she was available, that they were reconnecting as single people exploring old feelings. Learning that she'd been engaged the entire time, that she'd been lying to both of us simultaneously, disgusted him completely. He immediately cut all contact with her and actually thanked me for telling him the truth. Turns out she'd been manipulating both of us, playing us against each other in her twisted comparison game. The aftermath was swift and brutal for her. Within 2 weeks, she'd lost her fiancé, most of her friends, her family's respect, her backup relationship, and nearly lost her job. The life she'd been so carefully constructing, keeping me as the safe choice while exploring her options, collapsed entirely. She made one final attempt to reach me, showing up at my apartment late one night, drunk and desperate. She screamed at me through the door, calling me vindictive and cruel, saying I'd destroyed her life over a mistake, that what I'd done was worse than anything she'd done. I didn't open the door, but I did respond. I told her through the door that she'd destroyed her own life with her choices. I'd simply made sure everyone knew the truth about those choices. If she was ashamed of her behavior, maybe she shouldn't have engaged in it. The lesson she'd tried to teach me about love requiring blind trust had backfired completely. Real love, I'd learned, requires honesty, respect, and genuine commitment. Her version of love, secret meetings, constant lies, backup plans, and emotional manipulation, wasn't love at all. 6 months later, I'm grateful every day that I discovered the truth before the wedding. I can't imagine the devastation of learning about her deception after legally binding myself to her, especially if children had been involved. Sometimes people reveal exactly who they are when they think you're not paying attention. My ex-fiancée showed me she was someone who viewed relationships as games to be won, who saw love as a competition between options, and who believed trust meant accepting lies without question. I chose not to marry that person. Best decision I ever made. The wedding date we'd planned has come and gone. Instead of celebrating a marriage built on deception, I spent that day hiking alone, thinking about how close I'd come to making the biggest mistake of my life. For the first time in months, I felt genuinely grateful. Not bitter, not angry, just thankful that sometimes the truth comes out exactly when you need it most. She taught me that if someone really loves you, they won't ask you to trust blindly. They'll give you every reason to trust completely. That's the difference between love and manipulation, between partnership and control. I'm looking forward to finding someone who understands that difference.